posting to two of your peers by tomorrow at 11:59. You can get some points for that. Okay, that'll be discussion question number 2. We'll close that up tomorrow. Coming back next week, we'll do chapter 7 next week, and then your written assignment number 1 is due Saturday the 7th. Next Saturday, quickly approaching, by 11:59. Okay. Again, please look at that link that I sent you on Monday on the proper formatting of an APA paper, please. And then discussion question 3 opens up on that Sunday. The initial response on Tuesday is going to close on Friday. The following week we'll do chapter 8, juvenile court, and then we have spring break. When we come back from spring break, we're going to talk about school shooters, and then get ready for exam 2 at the end of the month. Okay. April the 25th, written assignment number 2 is due, and then we are on track for the final on Monday, May the 11th. I think that's pretty much it. Okay. So, any questions on the assignments or due dates, calendar, written assignments?
Professor, I have one question.
Yes.
For the written assignment, so we just choose a topic of what we discussed so far, like juvenile game.
You can choose a topic of anything related to the class.
Okay, and then we just base our entire paper off that.
Yes. Yeah. It doesn't have to be anything we talked about, but just anything related to class.
Okay.
Juvenile justice system under that umbrella.
Perfect. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, so we left off here talking about the different types of gangs, the typologies of gangs. Now I want to get into more of the characteristics of the gangs themselves. Generally, when we talk about it, when we try to characterize gangs, we tend to characterize them in these 6 categories. Number 1 is age. We look at gangs through the lens of age. And again, I'll look into these individually, but just do little side notes. When you look at gangs historically, you always look at it through the lens of young people. Young people tend to join gangs, right? And on the other end of that spectrum, they tend to transition usually in their very early 20s. Are very entrenched in the gang life. You can see them going into their 30s, even and beyond, right? But again, not common, but I mean, they do exist, obviously, right? But generally speaking, when we talk about gangs, it's the behavior of young people. So looking at it through age. We also, number 2, we also categorize gangs by race and ethnicity, or ethnicity. Okay, there's Asian gangs, there's white gangs, there's Hispanic gangs, black gangs, so forth and so forth. Okay, so we look at it through that lens as well too. Number 3, gender, of course, right? Again, historically, when you think about gangs, you think about males, boys, right? Men, young men. Okay, but there were also female gang members. I was just showing you, if you caught the video earlier, I was just showing you a video on girl gang members, right? So they do exist, but historically, and the interesting thing too is when I was talking about the gang researchers, Thrasher and Klein, and I'm gonna. I think the book makes reference to Yablonsky, who's also a very, very well-known gang researcher. They tend to overwhelmingly do research on male gang members because there's more male gang members, right? What we have seen, though, in the last, I'd say about 15 years or so, more girls are becoming not just involved in gangs or joining gangs, but becoming more violent within the structure of the gang life itself, too. Okay. Gender is really big. Number 4, gang migration. How do gangs move around from region to region? Right. So, how did Arkansas? How did that state start having problems with Bloods and Crips? Right. Bloods and Crips is an LA invention. So how did they end up in Arkansas? How did they end up in Tennessee? That's migration. That's the movement, right? And there's also international migration too. 18th Street's international. MS is international, right? Number 5, communication. How do they communicate with each other? I'll get into that in a few minutes as well too. And then obviously number 6, their behavior, their activity, their delinquent activity. What's their level of gang behavior, gang activity, right? And again, I think I may have mentioned this. The vast majority of people who join gangs don't tend to be very violent. They like to hang out, they like to get high, those kind of things. Very, very seldom do they get involved in the violence that we think about when we think about gang activity. Age, race, and or ethnicity, gender, gang migration, how they communicate with each other, and then the delinquent activity. So let's look at age. Again, gang members have typically been seen as juveniles. And again, historical, right? Based on the research, we know that juveniles first learn about gangs around the age of 9. They're a little bit more cognizant, okay, of what gangs are. And again, a lot of that has to deal with their environment. If they have older siblings, if they have parents, the community that they live in. But generally, we look at kids first learning about gangs around the age of 9. They actually first get involved in violence around the ages of 12, 13, 14, in that range. Okay. And again, nothing's absolute. Whatever I tell you is not the absolute. There's exceptions to everything. Again, that does a lot of that involves the areas that they live in, the communities that they're raised. Right? I remember we had. This is many, many years back when I first started in the department. We had an 8-year-old boy in juvenile hall for a drive-by shooting. Again, we're talking about 30 years ago, but the youngest kid I've ever seen locked up in our system, 8-year-old kid for a drive-by shooting. Yeah, so around 12, 13, 14-ish, they first get involved in violence. And then they actually originally get jumped in the initiation process, and whatever that you think of, when you think about initiation, around the age of 13, 14, 15-ish, in that range. Okay. So quite young, very young. What we've also seen, and again, not in large numbers, but recently, there's some evidence that shows gang members that continue their gang activity well into adulthood. And we, researchers, sociologists, they really, it's just a guess at this point, but they hypothesize that 2 of the main reasons that you're seeing older gang members is, number 1, the loss of very low-skilled manufacturing jobs. These are the jobs that people could do that potentially had, and I'm not throwing shade on anybody. That's not disrespecting anybody, but just individuals that maybe didn't have top quality education education. Maybe they dropped out of school. They don't have a lot of employment skills. So they're not employable necessarily in high wage jobs. So a lot of them turn towards low skilled manufacturing jobs. Well, a lot of those jobs are gone now. Technology has taken those jobs, right? So they're limited in their job prospects. So that's one of the reasons that they're staying in the gang longer, right? They have nothing else to do. And then number two is the increased money-making opportunities, especially when it comes to drug activity. So not only they don't have employment skills to gain employment, obviously they need money, so they stay in this lifestyle longer because there's money to be made in this lifestyle as well. Okay. Number two, we're looking at race and ethnicity. So there's no racial or ethnic group that's excluded from gang participation. We have white gangs and Asian gangs and black gangs and Hispanic gangs. It covers pretty much all racial groups at this point. Typically, again, and when you look at this from a historical perspective, right, typically gangs are racially or ethnically homogenous. So it's all brown people in the gang, all black people in the black gang, all Asians in the Asian gang, all white people in the white gangs, like that. It's very homogenous. Okay. And so when you look at, and this is especially relevant when you look at the conflicts. Okay. So there are many examples that I can give you about conflicts between gangs that usually involve gangs of the same racial or ethnic background. So when you look at gangs, for example, I'm going to take Northridge because, Scouts say Northridge. So if you look at the Northridge area, maybe, that part of the San Fernando Valley, there's a large, let's say, Hispanic population, right? So you have neighborhoods that cluster, that also tend to be very homogenous. So you have one set of kids on this block who, claim that territory, and then 2 blocks you have another group of kids, Hispanic kids, that's their territory. So the beef tends to be very intra-racial within the same race, right? So there's a lot of conflict between gangs that usually involve gangs from the same racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, okay? And that's the same thing with blacks as well, too. Asians, the same thing. Intra-racial gang violence. However, now we get into some of these very, very large international gangs. 18th Street is a good example, right? The 18th Street gang was probably the first major Hispanic gang within the Hispanic gang structure that broke the racial lines by allowing African Americans to join 18th Street. When I was at, I don't remember which probation camp I was. I think it was Rocky. I was at Camp Rocky. I was the assistant director of Camp Rocky for 13 years, I think it was. I met, and again, I'm talking, this is like 25 years ago. This one kid, black kid, African American kid, small little guy, who was from 18th Street and spoke better Spanish. I grew up in a Spanish-speaking home. He spoke better Spanish, and you look at him, he's African American. He identifies as a black kid, but he was from 18th Street. Yeah, the first major Hispanic gang that broke the racial lines, 18th Street. Some of the first black youth gangs organized in the early 1920s, but they actually formed as cart clubs. interesting topic, if you want to write about it, about black gangs and the formation. If you look at the historical aspects of the black gang subculture, I'm talking specifically here in Los Angeles. They formed as car clubs, and then eventually, because of the beef that they were having, they morphed into a gang. So, but the initial early black gangs were actually car clubs. Asian gangs, again, we know that they tend to victimize members of their own ethnic group, right? And many of the white gangs actually organize as derivatives of the skinhead movement. Again, interesting topic if you want to look at this, but just keep it, reference to the juvenile stuff. But if you look at some of the white gangs, they really came out of this movement, out of the skinhead movement. And so they also tend to be very big on violence as well, too. Number 3 is gender. Again, if you're interested in watching the video, I don't know if it'll let you. Yeah, I might have to go directly to YouTube. But the young lady that was being interviewed, Myra, I think her name was. I don't remember her name. But the one from Temple 13, she showed you her tats on her stomach. She was actually incarcerated at the Dorothy Kirby Center when I was there as a therapist. I know her. Matter of fact, one of the pictures that they showed in this documentary was taken at the Dorothy Kirby Center. Very nice young lady, extremely bright. She was working after she left. She started working for, I think, a law firm or something. I mean, she had a really good job. Very, very bright young lady. But she got caught up into the gang world, and so she got into some trouble early on as a juvenile. But again, until recently, most of the research on gangs focused on male participation in gangs, obviously because there's more male gang members. The traditional female gang member role really was just to be, or they formed themselves to be a female auxiliary gang, meaning that their sole purpose was to support the male gang members of that gang. So, for example, I'm just making this up. MS-13 would have a gang called the Tiny Midgets, and then all males. And then an offshoot of that would be the Tiny Midgets, but it would be for females if they wanted to join the same. So it would be an auxiliary or an offshoot of the male gang, of the Tiny Midgets. Okay, and so their sole purpose at this point, they actually assumed these 3 roles. Okay, 1, they were as lookouts. That's all they did. They just served as lookouts. They would stand on a corner when they saw a cop. They would send a text message or call somebody or something like that, right? That was it. That was their thing. And number 2, they would either carry guns or drugs, with the understanding that if they got arrested or busted, right, they knew that a male police officer could not do an intimate pat-down search on them. I mean, they can do a peripheral pat-down search, but they couldn't touch stuff and you know what I'm saying, right? Okay. So the male gang members said, hey, why don't we let little Flocka hold the guns or the drugs? Apparently they have some unique hiding places, and so it was a good way to hide the stash from the police. Okay. Or number 3 was the biggest one. They would be the girlfriends of the gang members, the male gang members. So they were there mostly for the companionship, the sex part of it, those kind of, the girlfriend role as it. Okay. None of those roles, 1, 2, or 3, had anything to do with violence. didn't have anything to do with, running the gang. They were just there as an auxiliary function for the male gang members, right? Either as lookouts, or they carried some of the stash, the guns or the drugs, or they were just the girlfriends of the gang members. Okay. Female gang members, according to the research, the limited research, are as likely as males to participate in drug use and some delinquent activity, but less frequently than males. Okay. Here comes the but. But it's changing. The role of female gang members has actually evolved in the last probably 10 to 15 years. We now have female gangs that are autonomous gangs, meaning that they're not affiliated with male gangs. They're not the auxiliary gang for the boys anymore. They're freestanding gangs that are not connected to male gangs. They're autonomous. Okay. However, I can tell you this for a fact. The majority of female gang members are often overlooked and they're underestimated. Police don't always take them seriously. Law enforcement doesn't always take them seriously. But they can be just as violent, if not more. They can be just as violent as their male counterparts. Okay. Do not underestimate female gang members. They can be dangerous. Where am I? Okay, gang communication. Gangs want, I think, obviously above anything else, gangs want respect. Gang members want respect. Gangs want recognition, especially from rival gangs. They want recognition from the larger community, right? One of the ways that they do that is through communication, how they communicate, either amongst each other or with other gang members. Okay. Generally speaking, there are 4 ways that gang members communicate amongst each other and with other people. Okay, so I'm going to, never done this before, let's see if this works. I'm going to call on somebody, or actually a few of you, to see if you can come up with, if you want to do all 4, great. Want to do 1, let's do 1. Okay. Vanessa Rublakaba. Name 1, please.
Could it be
how do we communicate with each other?
Gangs could communicate through like hand signals.
Bam! Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you so much. I didn't think people were going to get that one. Vanessa, wonderful. You want to try for another one? Yeah, that was a great answer. Hand signs.
I mean, we covered slang, so I assume that's like one of. I don't know if that counts.
Which one? What was it?
Slang, like types of slang.
Oh, slang. Okay. No, that's usually within. You could say argot. I think that's the term that we use, argot. I'm going to put that to the side. That's a good answer. I like that. How about Max? Max Mercado.
like specific clothing?
Clothing. That's number 2. Very good. Okay, we're halfway there. Wow, that was pretty good. Isha?
Like tagging.
I'm actually going to increase that to graffiti.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yes, that was good. Yes. I would have, on the test, I would have accepted tagging. Yeah. Graffiti? Absolutely. Hand signs? Absolutely. Yes, flashy hand signs. Clothing? Yeah, the style of clothing, the colors of clothing? Absolutely, right. Right. What's the 4th one? Very obvious. I think it's obvious.
Tattoos.
What is it?
Tattoos.
Tattoos is number 4. That's it. Very good. Graffiti, no particular order. Graffiti, tattoos, hand signs, and clothing. Tattoos are used, not exclusively, extensively though, by Hispanic gang groups. Absolutely. We're seeing more and more black gang members with tattoos as well too. Right? Yeah. Tattoos is big. And you'll see that a lot in the institutions that you're working in. Yeah. Good job, you guys. Very good. It's easier than I thought. All right. I should do that more often. Delinquent activity. Here's the gang stuff. The crime stuff. Some common characteristics. So, gang members, we know that gang members are more likely to commit delinquent acts than non-gang members. We know that, obviously. The majority of gang members, do not participate in violent stuff. The majority of gang members do not participate in violent activities. You'd be surprised, many of them don't even participate in any kind of drug stuff, like drug trafficking, possession. They'll smoke it, they'll use it, but they don't generally tend to sell it for money-making purposes. I think we talked about specialty gangs. There are some gangs that specialize in a particular type of offense, like here's a big one: human trafficking, human sex trafficking. There are some gangs that's all they do because of the lucrative money that they make in regards to human trafficking, sex trafficking. Right? Much more so than drugs, because once you sell drugs, that's pretty much the extent of that transaction. When you talk about human beings, they're reusable, right? So think of it from the fact of human trafficking, right? You get a female victim and you traffic them, and it's over and over and over again. So there's a lot of money involved. Extortion is really big too, for some gangs, right? Drive-by shootings used to be a thing, not really so much anymore. They're sprinkled out there periodically, but not like in the 90s, 80s and 90s. It doesn't even compare. But so when you look at offenses like drive-by shootings, they're rare. They are rare. Okay. The majority of the time, gang members spend the majority of their time hanging out, going to parties, getting high. That's basically it. They're not, generally out there. The other thing I can tell you too is, and again, this is just based on some of this is based on research, but also experience, lived experience, is that if you don't bother them, they don't bother you, kind of thing. So they really don't like the police attention. So again, you may have different experiences. You may need to have a different gang members, but generally speaking, they really don't bother people that don't bother them, kind of thing. So I want to give you these 5 examples of how society historically has responded to gangs. And just looking at the 5 categories here, I can tell you that the one that we tend to use the most, that we've always used historically, is number 5. We've always believed that working with gangs is a law enforcement issue, and so it's always been about suppression. It's always been about suppression. How do we keep our foot up their asses, putting them in jail, incarceration, just making life miserable for them. And I can tell you that it hasn't worked. It's been pretty much a failure. But that's our go-to. Call the police and have them deal with it. Okay? But that's not the most effective. But it's been used the most. Okay? Community organization. This is where we and the community members, there are efforts to mobilize the community to deal with gangs. For example, having these peace rallies, right? You see that all the time, right? Maybe creating like a street outreach worker program. We have people in the community that, and they could be, ex-gang members. So that's really big too. We have those as well too. Most of you probably live within the city of Los Angeles, the city limits of Los Angeles. The city of Los Angeles has a program through the mayor's office called the GRID program, Gang Reduction and Youth Development, the GRID program. And within the GRID program, they have regional program managers, and they're responsible for a certain region of LA, the LA city. So there's San Fernando Valley, and then they break up the San Fernando Valley into 2 sections. There's South Central, there's East LA, Hollenbeck, there's the San Pedro area. So there's different regions, and then these people respond generally to gang stuff that happens within their region. And they work very closely with community-based organizations, and those community-based organizations have these street outreach workers, these ex-gang members who, still command a lot of respect in their neighborhoods, go out there and they try to calm things down when there's a shooting or a killing or something like that. Right? That would be an example of this community organization process. Right? Communities that develop safe passage routes. Again, kids having to cross rival gang territory to get to school or to get to work, right? So we create safe passages, right? Those kind of things. Having the church, so faith-based partners, right? And a lot of the churches, a lot of the faith-based partners, they're the ones that actually organize these community peace rallies. Operation Ceasefire, I don't know if you remember that. It's been a while. That came from the churches. Right? So that's community organization. It works pretty good, I think. And then you have opportunities provision category, the opportunities provision. As the name implies, this is really about giving gang members opportunities to do something different, right? Opportunities provision. The goal here is to deal with gangs through primarily these 3 functions. One is employment, giving them a job. It's homeboy industry, right? Giving them a job. Some kind of job training or like vocational training, plumbing, welding, whatever. Okay? And then number 3, education, enhancing their education. Okay? And again, I don't think anybody does any better than Homeboy Industries. Great organization. Okay? But again, there's opportunities for the faith base partners to get involved. Community youth centers are really big with this. I like community youth centers. Even more and more, surprisingly, community. Oh shoot, I forgot. Darn it. I'm embarrassed because it's a great organization. But anyway, most of the Cal State systems have this group called, or a club, and a club called Operation U-Turn, or let's just say it's Operation U-Turn, but I don't think that's the name. So students who are students of Cal State Northridge who have been involved in the criminal justice system, the juvenile justice system, can come into this program, and this program really helps with like tutoring and mentoring and things like that, helping them to get to diploma, obviously, by graduation. And it's a great program. I've had them as guest speakers in my classes, and it's a really, really good program. I think it started in Sacramento or San Francisco. I don't remember which campus, and then it spread to most Cal State campuses have this program. So, look them up if you're interested in kind of just connecting with them. It's a great program. Now I'm gonna be thinking about. I'm gonna find out what the name of the program is, because I'm embarrassed that I don't know, because I should know this. Okay, organizational change and development. Again, here the goal is organizational adaptations, new changes, right, that facilitate the application of gang control strategies. Organizational adaptations that facilitate the application of gang control strategies. Again, getting those youth outreach workers and law enforcement to work together. Collaboration. So, when there's a gang crime in the community, when there's a gang shooting, maybe a murder that takes place, right? The law enforcement officers feel comfortable reaching out to the youth outreach workers and asking them to help calm things down. Right? Having that mutual trust between the two of them, which is hard, by the way. One doesn't trust the other because of history. One doesn't trust the other because, they're ex-gang members. All that nonsense, but that hinders the collaboration aspect of it. Okay? And then you want organizational policies and practices to become very inclusive and community oriented, with special references, right? Especially to these kids, to these young people, right? I'm going to use LAPD as an example, which I'll get to, which I'll talk about, I think, in my next slide, my next discussion. So LAPD, they have programs in place. I mean, they've had programs many years that work with troubled kids in the community. Operation Jeopardy, I think, was one of them. Right? They put cops in various community centers. They mentor these young kids. They bring in these guest speakers, these mentors that work with these kids. That's what we're talking about here. That's the org. But LAPD has to invest in this. They have to believe in this process, right? That's the organizational change that needs to take place, as an example, right? I think Sheriff has a little bit, they have like a boxing club, but it's not organizational wide. I think like East LA Station has it, maybe Lennox has it, so it's not department wide. Social intervention. really the goal here is just counseling, more like therapy kind of stuff, right? Counseling and really just other direct attempts to change the values of these young people in order to make being in a gang less attractive. Right? The interesting thing that I like about social intervention is that you're really not working with the gang in and of itself. You're working with the individual kids. Okay, so this is very targeted. This is where the counseling aspect comes in, one-on-one stuff. Okay, so when we talk about social intervention, this is targeted to the kid, the individual kid, and not the gang as a unit. Okay, so if we can work with one, we can change one kid's direction in life. Great, then he's not a gang member. We'll go find another one. We'll get another kid, work with that kid, and hopefully they'll see their ways and they'll do something else. And so it's very meticulous working with individuals. Okay? Again, very community-based oriented. So you're looking at community-based centers, right? That these centers have training programs, substance abuse classes, mental health, therapy, counseling, those kind of things. But everything is in the community. Takes place. Okay. And then suppression. This is just about police. That's all this is. That's all it is. This is the use of the criminal justice system to reduce gang behavior. It's the police. That's it. Very aggressive. A lot of gang sweeps. A lot of them. If you look like a gang member, you're gonna get picked up. Piece of cake. No problem. Adios. Very aggressive patrols. They come in like this invading army. They do their thing. They cause the chaos, and then they leave. Like, who wants that? Which strategy has been the most commonly used to deal with gangs? Obviously, it's suppression. I mentioned that. Suppression. Okay. Which strategy or strategies has been the least used to deal with gangs? Opportunities provision has been the least used. Opportunities provision. However, and here's the but. In many surveys that have been conducted, suppression was the least effective and opportunities provision was the most effective. You see how we get that mixed up? We get that backwards? We're using the least effective method, historically, we've used the least effective method to deal with gang members, and we've kind of ignored the most effective method to deal with gang members, historically. Doesn't make a lot of sense. So, all right, Adrian.
Hi, Professor.
Hi, Adrian.
Just for the sake of the PowerPoint, the most common one, we are still going to put suppression though, and for the least, we're still going to put opportunity.
The most effective, opportunity provision. The least effective, suppression.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I'm not going to start police until on Monday, so I don't want to just. We're ahead of the schedule anyway, so we're good. We're good on time. All right. So that's it, folks. Don't forget about you have an extra credit quiz today too. So if you're interested, check that out. Opens up at 11:30. Closes at 11:59 p.m. Okay. I'm a little bit behind on the points. I'll catch up this weekend. And I think that's it. Have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy this beautiful weather and be safe.